Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowry.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Just do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening. Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm an exercise physiology and sports nutrition professor of about 20 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens, strength coach around Strength Guild, also powerlifter, Highland Games athlete.
Okay. We're just pulling it together this morning, everybody. We're slurping coffee and doing our thing.
That's right.
Let's start with the listener mail. I have one mail and one news, everyone, and then we're going to talk in the topic of the day after the break about minimums, minimum doses of different things, whether it be supplements or drugs or even pounds on the bar. You know, oftentimes you hear about some of the coaches. Phil, I can't remember who it was. Is it Jim that talks about minimum?
Finding the minimum effective dose.
There you go. So I thought we could address that from, nutrition, lifting, the whole spiel. Because if you can hone in and dial in, that phrase is funny to me. But if you could dial in what your minimums are, well, for efficiency reasons, that begs the question, why are you doing a lot more than that? Right? I mean, maybe there's sometimes you should, but anyway, let me get to this first letter. I just got this, and it's from a listener. It's just entitled Fan Letter, so we're going to keep this anonymous. But it says, please see the attached paper from my 8-year-old. He often listens to the show with me. He probably listens to me a little bit too much also. This was an opinion piece for his class. All right, so I thought listeners could get a kick out of this. I did. So this is simply entitled Protein. Again, he's 8. In my opinion, protein is the most important and delicious food group. One reason is it has meat, like chicken, steak, deer, bear, cow, pig, and shrimp. Now, I'm going to digress just for a minute, but it's interesting his choices of meat there. Deer and bear. Dad must be a hunter, huh? The second reason is it gives you big muscles. The last reason is you can combine it with lots of stuff, like shrimp and grits, tacos, and he goes on a little list here, split pea soup, meatball, sub, and then he talks about sandwiches, ham and cheese, hamburgers, sausage and cheese, and egg sandwiches. That is why I love protein. That's the end of it.
Me too, buddy. Me too.
Classic. If he's listening to the show with his dad, yeah, I hope. Well, obviously we're pretty PG-13, so, but he's not quite 13. But this little dude is on the road to growth. Doing it right, my man. At least in my opinion. So, thank you for that. That was good. It's a nice way to wake up and read that and have my coffee.
Yeah.
One bit of news.
Strength and muscle sport news.
This is something that I happen to just notice. I always say comes across my desk. This is about breakfast. You're always hearing about intermittent fasting and should we or should we not, eat breakfast, because if you don't eat it, it would essentially extend the fasting period and all that. But then, for decades, of course, people have said breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So this is entitled Effect of Breakfast on Weight and Energy Intake, a systematic review and meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. This is British Medical Journal, brand new. To examine the effect of regular breakfast consumption on weight change and energy intake, calorie intake, right, in people living in high-income countries. And I think, of course, they just say that meaning, the first world, sometimes people will say, like first world problems. We're not starving most of the population. I'm not saying food insecurity doesn't exist here. Of course it does, but anyway. So this is a meta-analysis. It's a study of other studies trying to get to the heart of the matter about breakfast They looked at trials published between January of 1990 and January of 2018, so right up through last year. They looked at studies that included a measure of body weight or calorie intake. 2 independent reviewers extracted the data and assessed for the risk of bias. Now, that's an interesting slant on this particular paper. I need to look in a little bit further as to how they systematically look at bias, right? Because my perspective is that all scientists are human beings, and we're all prone to bias, and it's hard to not inherently have some. But of the 13 included trials, 7 examined the effect of eating breakfast on weight change, and 10 examined the effect of breakfast on calorie intake. What did they find? They found a small difference in weight favoring participants who skipped breakfast. In other words, slightly lighter in body weight is what they mean by favorable. And again, that's something, when we read stuff, Phil, it's like backwards sometimes, right? Like, oh, so wait, you weigh less if you skip breakfast and that's favorable? Anyway, but there was some inconsistency across the trials. Participants assigned to breakfast had a higher total calorie intake than those who skipped breakfast, and the mean difference was 260 calories per day. So not a huge difference. In fact, again, talk about population specificity. 260 calorie breakfasts, I eat triple that, even now. But, okay. And then it says there was substantial inconsistency across the trials that they studied. It does say that bias was a problem. It says, as the quality of the included studies was mostly low and or biased, the findings should be interpreted with caution, but they concluded that this study suggests that the addition of breakfast might not be a good strategy for weight loss, because it literally came out to about a 1 pound difference in body weight for people who didn't eat breakfast versus those who did. Anyway, might not be a good strategy for weight loss regardless of established breakfast habit. Caution is needed when recommending breakfast for weight loss in adults. So maybe they're just trying to get at the point that it's almost dogma. Oh, eat breakfast. But again, this comes back to your goals. If you want to have energy to lift later, eat your damn oatmeal. That's my bias, right? My opinion. But this just basically says it just doesn't matter much one way or the other. And I think it comes back to homeostasis just ruins a lot of these clever little tweaks people try. I'll extend the fast, or okay, well, you're going to cut all of 260 calories and maybe a pound off your body weight on average. Not to say there's not more structured ways to go about this and look at this, but again, this is a study of other studies, and it suggests it just doesn't matter that much. Phil, what about you with your clients? Do you have breakfast skippers? I probably asked you this in the past, or what do you recommend?
I have some that do. But I try and get them to eat something before they come in. Some of my 5:30 a.m. people, it's hard.
Oh, yeah.
Because then you're talking they need to wake up at 4 and get something in. So, and some of them just work well that way, but it's definitely a minority. Most of them do well by getting something in first, and even if they haven't before, we start them on that, getting some kind of at least small snack in, and then they'll find out they train better. So
yeah, I just think it has sort of an energizing and steadying effect on your nervous system. And when you're fasted for extended periods, I don't know. To me, life just sucks.
Yeah, and I don't know. As far as I go with strength athletes and things like that, I find it's definitely the food prior that has more impact on our training than the food after. So,
right,
when I know I have a hard Saturday coming up, I'm thinking about that on Friday. I need to eat today. I need to make sure I'm fed and ready to go for tomorrow. So
absolutely, yeah. Get that muscle glycogen, leveled up so you can perform. Makes sense. The two ways to look at that stuff has always been eat before to fuel up or eat after to recover. But the simple answer is just do both.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
I only have one last thing in the news. I saw this on social media, and since you know him, I thought I would ask you about it. Jim Wendler was talking pretty down about science. To me, it's an argument that I don't think anybody can ultimately win. Like, to hell with science almost. This is the way I was kind of reading this. Like, to hell with science. I've got, the vomit and blood and sweat to back up what I'm saying. But, of course, on the flip side, a scientist might say, well, but that's an N of 1. That's you, bro. Even if you've seen that for years or is true with you or even your clients, science tries to look at averages and answer little questions and inch forward, right? And, I mean, I always tell students, our lights come on and our buildings stand straight because of science. Like, it works. Medicine is much better than it was 100 years ago. That's because of science. Now, what's your thought in talking to Jim about that stuff? I mean, is he just saying, listen, experience rules? Or what's your perspective or what's your insights on that stuff?
Yeah, and then I'd also take it as, science is neat, and we all say this, but how many studies have we seen? Like there was the one I talked about a couple years ago where they put people in bench shirts and proved they make you stronger.
Thanks for that.
Wow,
right.
Thanks. There's a lot of that, and we all know there is. There's a lot of stuff that science is working on to prove that basically practitioners already know.
Yeah.
Because they've been doing it for years. And when you, like you said, when an N of 1, okay, that doesn't matter. And all of us coaches work that way. Let's say we use it on ourselves or one client. Hey, that's neat. Let's try it on 10 more, 15 more, 20 more. And then you start getting, hey, man, I've worked with 53 people and it worked.
Yeah. Well, I think in clinical science, I mean, they call that, like a serial case study or a series of case studies because it does bring insight. I think sometimes with that obvious kind of science, it's just that for science to work, you have to almost submit it for filing, if you will, get it documented so then it can inch forward. Because the knowledge and the wisdom of any given coach could be lost when she dies or he dies, and that kind of stuff. And I mean, yes, you pass it on to your clients. It's almost like that old martial arts model. I mean, you're talking about systems that are thousands of years old because they pass it on. But I think writing stuff down and then inching forward in a very systematic way, I still think is a good thing,
Yeah, and I think the other thing it hits on is there's a large group of people, and there always will be, especially newcomers, or maybe, not even intermediate yet, but, they've been at it a little while, and now they are totally wrapped up in making the perfect plan. So far wrapped up and so stressing about they never just implement and plan hard.
Yeah.
And I can take two people and, with Joe, we can try to implement the perfect plan and make these changes all the time. And with John, we just take a simple plan and work really hard. And John's going to pass him up. At some point, the rubber has to hit the road, and just hard work can beat out supposedly this perfect plan. That's not this perfect plan done poorly or done without aggression. If you take an okay or even a poor plan, we've all seen that. We've seen people. I mean, a lot of your bodybuilders could probably case studies for this that just have this horrible plan, but just because they implement it really hard, hey man, they're jacked. So,
well, what do we just say in that meta-analysis? Studies can have bias, and it kind of doesn't matter. That what I took away from that particular paper was that it doesn't really matter much if you eat breakfast or not. Whatever fits you. And I think that's sort of that's one of the tough things about working with free living people. In exercise physiology, we're one of the very few groups, other than very high end like federal studies that involve MD, PhDs, but exercise scientists, we do studies on people. It's not in a dish, it's not in a rat. We look at human beings, but when you work with free living people, homeostasis just kind of ruins the day. You can try to eat all your carbs in the morning versus the evening, or you can try to skip breakfast or intermittent fast, but to your point, unless it's part of some type of plan that you stick with long enough and really invest in, your body's adjustments and homeostatic mechanisms to stay even keel, it's going to ruin your clever little minutia. It's just going to ruin it.
I don't want to speak for Jim because I'll be honest with you, we don't talk about science much. We talk about what we're doing with our kids, what's working and what's not.
Yeah. Well, I know that you're not like his ambassador or anything.
Yeah, but no, I mean, that's the way I took it. It was like, science is great, but like we've talked about before, science without practitioners is almost meaningless. You just have something that we think this. Okay, now how do we test this? put it in the practitioner's hands.
Yeah.
Let them try it on hundreds of people in the real world. Because
Years
lots of
ago,
things work in the lab.
Right. That's right. People say knowledge is power. Years ago, I thought, no, applied knowledge is power, right? You got to have somebody applying it. That's that sort of reciprocal model. That's how this is, they often talk about bench top to bedside in clinical stuff, or in this case, it would be the chemistry bench top to literally the gym bench. Like, what is it? It really needs to be a reciprocal model. Like I'd say, oh, caffeine's, I'm seeing 10% increases in bar speed, Phil. What do you think?
Yeah.
Are you seeing that too? It's really good confirmation, or even, hey, can you go try this with your people? And then the practitioner feeds back, hey, this part really, I think there's something here. This part, I wouldn't keep pursuing that. I know statistically it's significant, but I didn't see much happening with that. And then, but you still have the scientist providing insights in a very controlled way that's at least hopefully more bias free, you would think. I don't know. I also think that a lot of times beginners do get involved. They get enamored with the science. They're like, oh, there's this whole world. Because this was me. Like, I discovered peer-reviewed journals on the second floor of the Kent State Library. And I'm like, oh, my God, this is solid gold. Like, there's much less bias here, or at least opinion. You get online, and even a lot of websites that used to have sort of evidence-based articles are very like a single coach's opinion kind of thing. And that has less value to me. But you do run the risk of, again, getting bogged down in minutia because science is reductionist. It has to be, right? It's not going to give you a conclusion like the journalists want. Like, this is good for your bench press. Well, I don't have any equipment that measures good. Never have, and that kind of stuff. I could talk about bar velocity after this dose of caffeine in this gender, in this training status. It's inherently reductionist. That's actually why it's good. But I think the average person, they want too much out of it. But, many years later, you're better off because you have made these incremental little check marks, and documented it and moved on kind of thing, I guess. I also got a feel from some of Jim's posts, and I don't remember if it was Instagram or where I saw this stuff, but he was, and I agree with this quite a bit actually, but he was railing a little bit against being a certified coach from one group or another. You get that, you see that when a lot of these, in my opinion, kind of useless nutrition certificates, they don't allow you to practice it. That'd be like me going to get a certificate in dentistry. Well, that's personal enrichment, but that doesn't make me a dentist. I don't have a license to practice. Yeah. And I think we probably agree on this too. The older you get, this overzealous buy-in with any single group can be dangerous because you lose perspective. You start to look at everything through one lens, and if the propaganda machine, and there is an element of this, right, with these different groups, professional groups that get involved in the science, talk about risk of bias, right? This is my opinion, but they're going to have a certain party line, and they're going to be very loath to drift from that, and if, to such an extent, right? Because then their books won't sell, or you can't illegitimize your own practitioners, right? If that's sort of your party line, and maybe that's where he was going with that, like. Be careful with this, because don't tell me that if I let my certification expire in this or that, something I've already held before, had one just like it, I'm too salty to give a damn, whether I'm current with my continuing education credits,
Yeah, no, and this is something I've talked about a lot. I know we've talked about it on the show. Like, the first group, when you start talking about that, is like, I don't even know if they're still around, but the Checkies, like Paul Check's people. And, there's a whole group of them where they've studied under one coach, and I think that's problematic when somebody tries to learn under one system, and that's it. They don't reach out and like question it and research other systems, because what you end up with poor copies of the original, and that's all they are. They're just trying to rehash what somebody else did, and they're probably restating it poorly. They never get out and like get a breadth of knowledge and like form opinions of their own.
Yeah.
And that needs to be done as a coach. You need to, learn this system, now question that system. And, try something different.
Oh, yeah.
And over time, you figure out, oh, hey, that was good. Maybe I'll stick with that. And what you end up doing is you pick four to six things out of this system, five or six out of that one, blah, blah, blah. And you end up with, you form an opinion of your own, and kind of like your own, one thing that Jim always talks about, form your own constitution or your list of, what would you call it? Your code. This is my creed. And as a coach. And as long as you live by that, don't break that. And that has to be built over time, over years, of trying things out. So this is what I believe in. Mm-hmm. And stick to that. If you don't break from that, you'll probably do pretty good if you've taken the time to actually build up a lot of knowledge to create that.
Yeah.
You can't just start tomorrow and become a personal trainer and this is my code. Your code has no backbone.
Right. Right.
So
how can you know what matters most when you just haven't exposed yourself enough?
Yeah, you just don't know. Yeah. So that's where I take it. Before we go to the topic of the day, while we're talking about Wendler, I'll give away some news. We're getting him out of the house. This has been like probably, 10 years in the making. I've been begging him to hey, let's throw something, let's do something. And because I think the last seminar he gave besides Swiss was the one, he's done a couple things, elite fitness things, but he did one like 10 years ago in California that I went to. And anyways, he's coming out of the house and we're throwing a big event at my facility. So I've already got his hotel room booked, so it's for sure going on. And we're going to have a competition. It's going to be an NOV meet where Jim picks the 3 lifts. So you got to be ready for whatever Jim thinks is amazing. And you're sure it's going to be hard work. And there's going to be, I'll just give away a few things. No gender classes, no weight classes. It's just everybody against everybody. There will be a coefficient that comes up, and whoever wins it, wins it. And we're hoping to get in the range of about $7,000 to give away to the people who win. There'll be a prize for first, a big prize for first, a smaller prize for second, and then probably like a consolation prize for third, and no participation ribbons. So,
right.
Alongside that, outdoors, we're going to have a Highlander event, which is half Highland Games, half Strongman. And then as well, we will do something that's called the Ironman, whereas if you have the balls to do them both, you will start out and do the NOV meet, and then you will go outside and do the other meet. So,
that'd be brutal.
We'll do two full meets in one day. This will be a one-day event. We've got a brewery lined up. They're going to brew some special beer, bring it down. We've got food trucks. We've got it all. So I'm going to be posting up hopefully next week. We're just waiting on art. I don't want to launch a website that's not totally done and give the final product.
Sure.
So the website's ready. I'm just waiting on new art for the event. And then we're going to sell spectator tickets ahead of time because we're going to end up capping the spectators too, because I just don't have an abundance of room. I don't want 500 people showing up and be like, oh, we're screwed. So,
right. Yeah.
We're selling tickets ahead of time to get in. It's $10. Yeah, we're going to close off the streets, working with the city on that. So closing off the street in front and to the side. So
I'm sorry, when did you say?
We're going to close off the streets.
Oh, no, I know, but I mean, when is this going to be? What month?
Well, I'll go ahead and let it out on here. We haven't let it out. It's going to be in June 15th.
Oh.
So that's a special announcement just for Iron Radio listeners. People on the interwebs don't know yet. So you guys and Jim's forum members are the only people that know right now. But June 15th. So we'll be around Friday night, the 14th, and then Saturday's the day. So we'll come in and weigh in on Friday.
Like it.
And then Saturday we'll get it on. So looking to have vendors there. I've already talked to, Mark Bell and the Slingshot team are going to do something. I don't know if as far as showing up yet or anything. But we've got a couple vendors already locked in. Like I said, we already have the brewery and the food trucks and Jim and his family. So Matt Vincent will be there with Hate Brand Goods. So
cool.
It'll be a good time.
That's actually tempting to me because June and July are the months that I actually can do stuff,
Yeah, you need to come down.
Yeah.
We're going to have a good time. So I'm going to end up live streaming this thing. I'm just buying all the equipment. It's like, I'm just going to buy it, and then I'll have it forever. And we can start doing live streams in my gym.
There you go.
So I figured we can start doing short live streams and like little seminars and stuff. That way I don't have to get out too much. I can start becoming a hobbit like Wendler.
Right. Yeah. Just broadcast from your hole. Right.
So.
No, that's cool. Okay. let's go to break, and when we come back, everybody, we're going to talk about minimums. So we'll be right back. Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that. And I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book, but that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks. Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, everybody, we're back. It's Phil and Lonnie, and we're going to talk about minimums with the concept of efficiency in mind. And, you know, it's an interesting thing to posit, right, is if you get benefit with a minimum amount, why would you do tons more? Because it starts becoming increasingly wasteful, you would think, at least if there's a threshold kind of effect. But so I'm going to toss out some questions to Phil, and we'll get some thoughts about this. Let's start with minimum number of sets in the big three lifts, Phil. I know you're probably going to say, well, it depends. You know?
Yeah.
But could you ballpark, do they differ? Is it like 3 sets minimum? Is it 5, you know, for the dead or the bench or the squat? What are your thoughts on minimum number of sets if someone was pressed for time or just wanted to be efficient?
I'd break it further down into minimum number. I don't like sets.
Okay.
I like to break things down into a minimum number of reps.
Yep.
So, like, here's the total dose we need to get that I find effective. And usually, you know, of course, as the load goes down, as the intensity goes down, the dosage goes up. So,
yeah.
You know, you start getting up to 80, 90%, and you could get as low as 1 to 3. You know, I mean, so you start getting in the heavy range, and what I'm looking for is, you know, we could get it done in 1 set if we wanted to. Let's say if we're 85%. We're looking to get somewhere in between. It depends on the athlete, and it changes. That's the other thing that changes is as they get stronger, there's a difference in between the effective dose for somebody that squats 1,000 and somebody that squats 405.
Right. Yep.
When we're talking 90%. So there's a lot of it depends.
No, I understand. Now let me clarify then. It is possible. There is a scenario in which somebody could do a single set and walk away, and you'd be very happy with that.
Yes, like if we're going to do a single set at 80% or whatever, which we'll do a lot of, you know, we're looking for something generally where I stop them, it ends up being in between, let's say 80%, it's going to end up being between 5 and like 8 reps, maybe at 80%. There's a really hard set. Or even 3 and 8, but depending on how advanced they are. But we're always ending it off with a rep or 2 in the hole. So what I'm looking for is an 8, where we stop things when the bar is still, when you're still moving correctly, before there's massive form breakdown. And we'll give you one pass, like, oh, that rep was messed up, you need to fix it. And if they don't fix it, if that problem shows up again on the next rep, we're done. We've passed your threshold. You've reached to the point where you can't fix it even on a coaching cue. So you're done.
Right. Yeah.
So if you can fix it on a coaching cue, okay, we'll keep going, because you just messed up. Everybody can mess up.
Like, don't practice it wrong.
Yeah. And we're looking to practice perfect reps all the time. But I mean, just to give you a general outline, I mean, at 70%, we're probably looking somewhere in between, if I take genders out of the equation and advancement, somewhere between 20 and 40 reps at 70%.
Yep.
80%, you're looking somewhere in between 8 and 15. 90% in between 1 and 10 is what we're looking for a minimum effective dose. So, and we don't 100%. Of course, it's 1. We're hoping. So we're hoping we can get 100%.
Right.
But sometimes that doesn't work.
Yeah, you're not going to do 10 singles with a 95% load in an advanced athlete.
Yeah, and
destroy them.
That's telling you where we usually end at. A lot of our stuff, especially when I'm working with people on site, it's different when I'm working with somebody at a distance because I can't be there. But we'll have a plan for the day, but that plan can change and go up and down depending on how they're moving for the day. Like, our plan is, okay, we're working to hard triples, and this is what we're shooting for. But depending on how you're moving that day, that might change. So it might go up, it might go down, depending on how you're recovered. All I'm worried about is speed on the bar and perfect reps.
Yep.
So, and as long as we get that, we're getting those hard sets in for the day, then we're fine. So I'm constantly moving people up and down. Oh, it's a good day. We're going to strike when the iron's hot a little bit. But then we have other plans where it's like just punch clock. Like, I got a bunch of high school kids in now, and all we're looking to do is get a lot of work in the off season. So it's very methodical. Okay, add 5 pounds, do it again, on your next time. It's okay, we're going up 5 more pounds, and we'll do that 4, 5, 6 weeks in a row, where they're just literally doing like periodized training, where they're okay, add 5 pounds, rinse and repeat. So we're just looking to build a base. So it depends again on, and they're not that advanced. So with my advanced athletes, I got to get a little more fluid.
Okay.
Because Brian can't come in and squat 930 every day.
Yeah.
He might only be good for 820. There's a big swing in what they're good for from day to day. But once you're talking advanced people, like super advanced. So.
That's those numbers you just gave, like, Brian, that's absurd. Oh my God. Well, it's like you're off the map, like, here be monsters, right? Because nothing even fits anymore.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the what you have to deal with as a coach. I mean, you really, what I've seen is my more advanced people, percentages really start going out the window a lot. And it's very individual with them. Like with Brian coming up to pull that 930, we only had 1 week in the whole training plan we ever went over 750 on deadlift.
Interesting, yeah.
The rest of the time it was spent much lower. It was spent in the 700 range, and he came in and killed 903. And it's because we can get our minimum effective dose out of just moving 700 and some pounds fast.
Yeah.
And his body, anybody, I'm guessing, can only handle so many 900 pulls,
Right, so. Totally. Yeah, we've talked about gross load versus percentages in the elite, and there's just so little science on guys like that. It's like you said, you almost have to be fluid and try to extrapolate from what you've experienced yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like one of my deadlifters that can pull 400 or something. Yeah, they can come in and hit 5 sets of 3 at 325. But if I tried to get Brian to pull 5 sets of 3 at like 830, no, he's gonna die.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, it's very dependent on their what they can do.
It's really just sort of a plausibility argument I'm trying to get at here with these minimums, right? I mean, because your end game is strength. I mean, from my perspective, this was years ago. I think it was a study from McMaster, but I was up in Ontario at the Ontario Exercise Physiology Conference, and essentially they were saying for muscle protein synthesis, so just hypertrophy reasons, right, 3 sets seems to be ideal. And if you go beyond that, there's not a statistically significant enhancement further. So, and that started making me think, especially in my post-competitive years, like now, like why would I do 8 sets of bench pressing? Like if 3 mostly gets the job done. Now, again, this is where the practitioner side comes in, because then, or the personal experience, because I'm like, well, I can guarantee I'm going to be better off in some way. It could be a sister muscles or some type of stabilizers, or I'm going to get some benefit if I then change the movement. And instead of barbell bench press, I go do some flies or something that's really rather different. Yeah. I'm going to get angles and differences. I think we had Joey Antonio on talking about satellite cell activation and, muscular development across, from origin to insertion of a muscle. And to me, that's why you do different movements. But even so, I don't see myself doing 20 sets of chest work in the gym from a muscle protein synthesis perspective, at least not in the same movement. Not only is it diminishing returns after so many sets, but I think it's actually detrimental, because then you're just burning calories that you could use to grow. Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you this. If we want to break down sets, if I broke down all the percentages I do and the reps I prescribe, it's usually somewhere between 3 and 6 sets for strength work.
No, that's good.
We're doing. It's probably right in there. It's 3 to 6 hard sets. No more than 6. But even when I'm working with some of my more fluid athletes, and we're talking about we're going up to solid but hard triples, it's usually going to be in that 3 to 6 set range. I don't want them to just. We need the total work in for strength. So it's not, our plan is never just, okay, I know we're using the safety squat bar. Last time I did this much for a triple, so we're going to go right to 5 pounds over that. No, we're going to get in that hard range, and then we're going to take smaller jumps. So we get into that 3 to 6 hard sets. I'm never worried about a true max in the gym. I'm more worried about total work done that's hard, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like we'll get into, let's say he did 575 for a hard triple last time. We'll probably start around 500, our triples, and then our next jump might be 530. Okay, that was harder. 545, 555. We're going to look to get in some sets in that range. That range, once it starts getting hard, we're looking to get multiple 3 to 5 sets of hard but solid work in.
Right. I like how you say sort of it might be as doubles or triples, but the total number of reps as the dose.
Yep.
I once drew, I published it somewhere, but basically it was a 2-way arrow, and it was that balance between, like, what's the total number of reps you might want to do in the gym? And again, I was thinking more from a muscle protein synthesis side of things, and some practical experience. But so on one end, if you're in 90% loads, it was 10 reps or less. And then on the other end, if it's 70%, it was sort of the other end of the spectrum, it was 40 reps. So that's sort of what you're playing with, I think, as far as total weight times rep volume,
Yeah, and I can't give up everything I've worked on over 20 years.
Oh, sure.
I've got tables of stuff where it's like, I've even got it broke down into gender and how advanced they are. Generally, I can tell you that most of my intermediate females they need more total volume. So their total dosage usually is higher.
Right, yeah.
Than a male in the same area. They can handle, I can take a girl, and a lot of times, or a woman, whatever and we can throw 90% on, and they'll hit 6. Or hell, we'll throw on 5 pounds less than their max, and they'll hit 5. And then we throw their max on, they hit 1. Where as a dude, you take 5 pounds off their max, and they still hit 1.
Yeah.
So there's a difference in there in that intermediate range. Now, once you start getting up into elite ranges, the genders kind of balance out. So like Felicia, she just pulled 455 for a triple She's not going to do. We can't drop 20 pounds off that and expect 8.
Yeah, women are more resilient. I think their tissues are more resilient in the whole estrogen effect, but at some point they can tear themselves apart like a dude.
Yes, exactly. So it just depends on how strong they are, and that's what I have. I have different. I'm starting to build different tables for my people that are more advanced. Okay, here's what I know they can handle, and even then it breaks down even further to this is what this individual responds best to. Yeah. But then I also have to test that because a lot of times we can get good advancement out of, okay, let's take them out of their comfort zone. Let's make them do sets of 20 in the off season. Where they're really good, they respond well to 1 to 3 reps. But we get in the off season, we're going to throw something totally different at them, and the load's going to be adjusted accordingly to where it's not that hard and it's very doable. But we'll get good response out of that, out of making them do what they don't like to.
Yeah.
So
okay, let me try to pin you down a little bit. So what about, like, I know you've made a comment before about minimum weight on the bar in the deadlift if you're a grown ass man. Did you say a 405? Is that what you said?
I still get shit for this. I get like hate mail. I will stand by that for my whole life, and I might even raise it now. But if you are a grown ass man, despite your weight, I don't care what you weigh, you should be able to deadlift 405. I don't care what your goal is. If you're a marathon runner, I could easily get you, and it would probably help your marathon running. Just to have that base strength behind you in your hamstrings and stuff. 405. There's no reason. I mean, a lot of my girls are doing that now with ease. Numerous ones of them, and I've got little 15-year-old kids that are doing that. So
it might be a form issue. If somebody comes up and they're like, "Listen, I can't get 2 1/4 off the ground." Let's say it's somebody who's recreationally active. That's going to be partly a form issue as well.
Yeah,
you think?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just can't deadlift 225, you've got
problems.
Weak and you've got problems.
Okay.
Yeah, for getting anybody to 405, I have. With females, it's a lot of work, especially your lighter females. But with females that are into strength training, it's not that big a deal. It's just hard work.
Right.
But with guys, I mean, I can get most 15-year-old kids to pull 405. I mean, give me a couple months, and a lot of them we can get them there if they're in any kind of decent shape. Now, if you bring me some kid that all he's done is played Xbox and eating Cheetos, then it's going to take us some time. We got to build some kind of athletic base first, and I can't rush through that. So
right. So
I'll stand by that. 405,
like a standard. Yeah.
Okay. Body weight bench. If you can't bench body weight, I mean, I'd love to say body weight press, but that's impressive.
Oh, right. Yes.
A body weight bench. Any dude should be able to do a body weight bench and maybe 1.5 times the body weight squat. There's a nice
fair.
baseline.
Yeah.
For just an average athlete. You start talking strength athletes, yes, it changes considerably. But
because you're talking like maybe a 315 squat, even a little less at 1.5 times body weight for an average sized person.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, and you'll be in decent shape. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And you could still go out and run to your heart's content. There's no reason you can't run and be able to come in the gym and squat 305 or 315.
Yep.
I mean, you'll be fine. So.
All right. I also said we would talk about supplements and meds and stuff like that. Let me offer a couple of things here. This came up last week. Is fish oils. I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said, "Well, we eat tilapia. Don't we get enough? And we don't supplement omega-3s." I'm like, "Well, that's not going to do it. Like, that's probably not the right fish choice." And then a student actually said, "Well, what's the minimum?" Well, let me lay it out here, because fish oils are something that I think most people should pursue. I don't think the Western world is going to provide them unless you seek them. Most people I know, unless they're eating lots of cold water fish like salmon, they're not getting enough. So if you look at the literature, a lot of the anti-inflammatory and antidepressant doses of omega-3 start around 500 milligrams a day, and average Joe gets less than half of that. Almost none when I look at diet records of college students. So if it's 500 milligrams, right, or half a gram, that's going to be sort of minimum. I take more than that. I take like a total of around 2,000 milligrams of EPA plus DHA, right? The active fatty acids, in the fish oils, but 500 milligrams. So if you go look, like some of these krill fish oil, I know they're more absorbable and whatnot, and Mike Nelson and I have talked about this, but they're so underdosed, in my opinion, that you'd have to take a half a dozen of them. So it's good to know, like, where, if there's a tipping point, like a minimum dose of fish oils, I would say that's around 500 milligrams a day. Something you might want to think about. For protein, this comes up all the time in like beginning nutrition or exercise science classes. How much protein do I need? Well, the literature suggests about 20 grams, which is conveniently about a scoop, of whey protein or egg protein, something like that. That's going to really, significantly increase muscle protein synthesis. And if you're young and you're eating triple that, that's diminishing returns, right? So if you want to save money, that might be the way to do that. Do 1 scoop of your whey protein or whatever protein powder you have, egg, some high-quality protein powder, and then maybe the other protein you get by eating something. Just go friggin' eat some food instead of just trying to, increase that with, these minutia-type calculations and stuff like that. So 20 grams minimum if you're young, maybe 40 if you're old and you're listening to this because you're anabolic resistant. But so that would be, in my opinion, per meal protein dose. Creatine, the lowest end of that would be 5 grams a day. I know a lot of people like to take a tablespoon, which is about 5 grams, 4 times a day and get that 20-gram loading dose. By day 4, like 90% of that's ending up in your pee. So, again, do you want to waste money or do you want to hit that minimum mark? And so, actually, 1 tablespoon, it might take a month for you to properly, fully load. But, a tablespoon after workouts with your food, you're good. You're probably good. It's going to take you a little bit longer. You're going to get a little bit less dramatic fluid shifts and that kind of stuff. And I know a lot of young guys, they like to swell up on the creatine a little because the hydration shifts into the muscles and they feel rounder and bigger. And okay, that's fine. That, just exciting to you. But minimum wise, yeah, a tablespoon after workouts over the course of a month, that sort of thing. I don't know. I'm trying to think of other, dietary minimums.
I got a fun one. I won't say who I was talking with, but we were having a conversation about anabolics, and I'll say this right now: if you're a strength coach and we talk about these things, it happens. So
that's right. Yes.
We got to talking about what was it, Anadrol, and how it's super liver toxic and this and that. And he's like, yeah. He said, so I went and researched it, and he said I went and looked in medical journals, and everybody's like, never take more than 50 milligrams because your liver will be fried in like 2 weeks. And he said in the medical journals, and I just looked it up myself because I was remembering the conversation while we were here. The effective dose in medicine for like somebody my size would begin at 100.
Interesting.
And it ends at 590 a day.
Wow. Yeah.
So, and he's like, the street knowledge, he said, is way, way away from science. It's like, they're like, yeah, they're totally comfortable. Here's 500 milligrams. It's going to make you feel better. You're talking muscle wasting and things like that. But I mean, even that, in anabolics. But then we also talked about it. It's all these people, and I posted about this not long ago. Like, people go from nothing to everything. I'll take them all. And it's like, bro, why don't you try a little bit?
Yes. Well, that's why minimums, right? Hence minimums.
And that's another huge case of the minimum effective dose. Like, take as little as possible to reach what you can. You've only got one body, and nobody's going to – if anybody's telling you, like, oh, yeah, anabolics are totally great for your health. No, they're not. There's lots of side effects, and you need to research that. Yeah. So the last thing you want to do is go take I'm going to take 5 grams.
And you know what, too? I mean, because of the way a lot of, like what you hear online and, lay people, they think, like, how many grams or how many thousands of milligrams. I mean, I can tell you back in the day, they didn't talk about these things in thousands. They were done in hundreds or even dozens. Like, minimum effective dose of, like, mixed testosterone esters, 200, 250 a week. Dude, you're going to feel that. And you're going to gain weight and strength. And again, that's 250 milligrams. That's a quarter of 1 gram.
Yeah.
And,
that's what,
that kind of thing.
And now you got guys talking like you said, they're counting in grams. But
right,
and that's where it starts. One of my favorite books was Jongkook's book on powerlifting, and this was back in the 80s, and he like lays out his training and what he took every day. So I'm just blatantly honest, and because I think it was back before they were banned and made totally illegal.
Yeah, but, Schedule 1 and all that.
It was right before the meet, he topped out taking 40 milligrams of D-ball. That was the highest he went.
Yeah.
And now you got guys like, I'm on 400 milligrams.
Oh, right. It does bring up a point that the different medicines have very different, whether it's like from a receptor affinity point of view or anabolic to androgenic ratio, like the amount of Winstrol someone might take to get ready for a bodybuilding show because it doesn't really make you retain water. It brings out striations. A lot of this stuff you're not going to see in medical journals. That's that might be 25 milligrams a day. Like you cannot even think gram quantities of something like that. Already it's going to make your HDL, your good cholesterol, essentially zero. So get off that shit after a couple of weeks. Yeah. It's a finishing drug. You know what I mean? And it's that sort of thing. Like they're vastly different. Or like nandrolone, right? Deca, much lower. You're usually not talking about gigantic doses because milligram for milligram, it's just a different medicine and you dose it differently. I know we have some PharmD guys who lift and listen to the show, and sometimes I'll even tap them for their knowledge on things, and they're probably laughing at this conversation, right? But again, you're talking about these like, Jersey Shores type people who they act like it's all one thing. Yeah. And it's almost like you need a metaphor. Like, guys, think about like there are different flavors of ice cream. They're very different. Ice cream is not one thing, and neither are these anabolics.
Yeah, and it's the sad thing is people, they don't do any research, and generally what I'm seeing now is what we just talked about is they don't start off and find the minimum effective dose. They're not like, I'll just take 250. They're like, give me a gram because he's doing 6 grams.
Right.
It's like, whoa,
of what?
Let's see what a little bit does to you.
Yeah. I've talked to guys backstage and stuff if they're using some of the the harsher meds like you mentioned, Anadrol, and that makes some people really feel like shit. Like really, they just don't feel good, and it's like, well, you can't even tease apart because of your ignorance and just like you said, jumping into all of it. You can't tell if this is a dose issue or is it the med itself because you just jumped. You just went to an 11 on the dial, and you didn't even try a 2 or a 3.
That's what I mean. The good thing is I deal with a lot of people on. Well, I deal with a lot of strength athletes, but I also deal with a lot of people that are on replacement, 50-year-olds and things like that.
Yeah,
and even they can tell you, man, the doc started me on 150 and I feel amazing. And it's this minimum effective dose to just feel good at some point.
Yeah.
And when you're talking with that population. And
like it could extend into the hydrating your joints, like joint health. Your back feels better. You're not foggy mentally. It's not just about sex drive or weights in the gym. Yeah. For sure.
And I mean, the good thing is I'm able to have open, honest conversation with, like, one of my guys was like, yeah, I'm on replacement this and that, and doc keeps me about here. He said, but I'll tell you what, when he got me up to 1,500, I was feeling amazing. It's like, yeah, I'm sure you were.
Right.
Yeah, but,
that hyper-physiologic, the pharmaceutical dose, different things happen in the body, right? It's just different things happen.
So, yeah, and that's, I mean, while we're talking minimum effective dose, I figured we better touch on that because I think a lot of people miss the cart on that thing, and they just go way, way too far.
That's a good call. It's that more is better. People have that more is better mentality, whether it's protein or juice or pick one, number of sets in the gym, all the hyperbole in the muscle magazines, like destroy your pecs, annihilate your quads. No. How about you just, max out protein synthesis and walk away, I
mean, look at caffeine. I remember a couple months back, you guys were talking about, I noted it while you guys were talking about, like, the effective dose was like 6 milligrams per kilogram or something.
Yeah.
That you found. I was like, oh, okay, I'll try that. It was like 800.
No,
I was like,
not for you. That's not you.
I went to the gym like, wow, this is too much.
Oh, for sure. In fact, you know what? I mean, with any kind of drug, we actually, there was a poster, one of the students, we made this there wasn't a direct linear correlation between caffeine intake and performance, and that's because the way statistics works is they try to draw straight lines. It's the general linear model, but the real effectiveness curve, and again, this is childishly simple to like a PharmD, but is yes, it does go up linearly to a point. Then you start to overdose, and it goes down. It's a U, upside down U, and your performance will actually suffer. You'll be so jittery, and that's a good point too. Caffeine's another one that people just more, or stimulant tough stuff in general. Pre-workouts, more is better. No, it's really, really not.
Yeah, and that's, I think it was 700 milligrams I took that day.
Jesus, Phil,
in a single dose, and man, I was flying. I was way overstimulated.
That's another. Dude, that is another example, like when we talked about uncharted territory with large mammals. You cannot do that 5 or 6 milligram per kg ergogenic dose in a large mammal because, some things are dosed more like on a threshold. Like you take 2 aspirin or you take 2 to 4 ibuprofen or whatever, because that tends to work. More is not better, and for whatever reason. Now, you know what? Unfortunately, I think with like gross bloated weight gain with anabolics, more is, in a very crude way, more effective at making the scale move, Yes. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people in our population, they do have a more is better mentality, whether it comes to number of sets in the gym or milligrams of caffeine or anything else. They just kind of apply this more is better because in some scenarios, from a very sort of ignorant, just gross, crude perspective, with some things it can be true up to a point. Yes. But like a good point you made. But then the side effects start becoming lopsidedly involved because you didn't try to do something. In my house, we do everything like that. Honestly, like whether it's over counter meds or whatever, is how little can I get away with doing this, and just let my body adapt, or and fight the infection a little myself, or whatever, whatever.
Yeah, hugely. I agree 100% on training and stuff, and training and drugs. It's impatience is what it is. It's like I talked about. Everybody wants to go from couch potato to cone in like a year.
Yeah, couch to cone.
So they take everything and train everything, and they're not thinking long term. So what do we see? We see a lot of these guys are wrecked after a few years. Whereas if they back things off and, hey, I'm going to take 5 or 10 years, they end up in a better place. They probably end up further than they would have, and they're still going.
Yeah.
And we're huge. We're not seeing a lot of it. We're already seeing it right now, and we're just at the beginning of this stage because strength sports are just on this upswing. But I'm already seeing people that are like 27 and done. You're not seeing guys make it into their 40s. And still going hard.
Dude, look at the old school bodybuilders. Bill Pearl still squatting 315 in his barn. Frank Zane doing backflips at 70, stuff like that. And then in the 90s, with the escalation of everything so dramatically, and you could say maybe that started with Dorian Yates, like that ridiculous freak. Don't get me wrong, there were some real freaks around then too, but now these guys, their career longevity is nothing. Like 3 to 5 years, and they've got kidney damage and torn everything, and it's like, idiot.
But even Dorian looks good. But he might be a genetic anomaly, and he's the beginning of that. So things, well, if that worked for Dorian, I'll just take 100% more.
Yeah. Well, and I think he got comfortable with being much smaller in his post-competitive years, and you've just got to get your head around it.
Yeah.
But instead of not being able to let go, right? That's a whole other topic, really, is not being able to let go a little bit. But all right.
Yeah, for sure. So.
Well, that's good.
At least
explore the minimums. Sure.
Yep, so.
All right. We'll talk to everybody next week. We got guests coming up here, 2 in a row, probably, and we'll see you then.
That'll work. Thanks, guys.
Hey listeners, have you seen the store at ironradio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry. And they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on
your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the stores. We try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, you know is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.